Hey, what's going on, guys? Today's going to be a special episode. It's going to be me talking about something I usually don't talk about, which is travel. Now, you might have noticed through the past 180 plus episodes that I have always been very involved in travel. I'm always very interested in travel. When guests have traveled, I go, tell me more. How did you do that? How did that work? How did that come to be? And the reason I'm going to talk about travel today is I actually just got back from 7 weeks in Europe. And when I say that, most people are like, whoa, what do you mean? How does that even work? So I'm going to talk to you guys about the origin of my travels and then how it kind of elevated into these different areas. So for me, and the reason I'm sharing all this is because there's a big connotation that you need to have all of this money to travel, you need all of this time to travel. And the thing I realize is that most people don't leave more than 20 miles of where they grew up. And I just want people, and the majority of Americans don't have passports. I'm not saying you need a passport because there's other cool ways to travel as well. US is very large. But for all the international people, like it's always good to realize that you can travel whenever, wherever, because you are in control of your life. You create your own life. Your life is created by you, by the decisions you've made over the past 5 years, and that's where you're at today. So I just want to bring you guys to the origin of it, and then we can kind of move forward. So back in 2017, it was actually 2016, I actually did a Birthright, which is a program that you're able to go to Israel at a very discounted rate, explore the country, get to understand the people. And I was able to go with my cousin, Justin, and I was able to go with my brother, Zach, which was an incredible experience. It was 10 days traveling around, but it was through a program, which is one approach. And we got to do super scheduled. I didn't have to do anything. It was actually really nice, and I really enjoyed it. Then I ended up studying abroad. So, like growing up, I've always gone on cruises and we did the Caribbean and all inclusives, and we've done a lot of that stuff. But it wasn't, to me, I think there's a relaxing vacation, and then there's traveling. Traveling's like doing the different hikes, doing the different activities, doing the different things. Maybe it's living in the city. It can be whatever you want, but those are my understandings of it. So like when you're going on a trip, you want to know if you want it to be a relaxing trip versus a travel trip. Definitely makes a big difference. So then I ended up going to study abroad in Rome, Italy, and that was fall of 2016. And when I did that, I was able to travel to all different countries like Switzerland, Germany, Croatia, London, Barcelona, everything in between. I know some of those were cities, but it really opened up my taste for what travel was really about. Because the thing was, that was the first time I was really placed in a different location, which opened up a whole world of accessibility to me because now that you're placed in a different area, everything becomes way more affordable. So most of the time when people do trips, they usually do like a 3 day trip or a 7 day trip, 10 day, 14 day, if they're really getting wild. And the difficult part about that is it's hard to really jump from place to place to place because you don't want to spend your whole trip traveling. Like you don't want to spend the whole trip in planes, trains, and buses. There's a point of it where you want to go explore the area. So majority of the time you won't put too many activities in and you just kind of want to see what's around. And so with me, study abroad was the first time where I had a home base and I was in a different location. So things were a lot closer to me. Like in America, I could never go to Switzerland for a weekend and come back. Theoretically, you can, but it's a very long flight. It takes a lot of time. You're going to be kind of jet lagged. So this was the first time where I had that availability and that space to really explore what was near me and what was close to me. Basically from there, after that, I ended up traveling internationally once a year. COVID came, and what ended up happening was I started to hear about this concept of where you live in a location and you work. So that was very foreign to me because the majority of the time when I would do these trips, it was focused on the trip. It was never let's work and do the trip. And my not even girlfriend at the time, who became my girlfriend and now is my fiance, Madison, ended up going on this trip with me where it was this idea where we would live in different Airbnbs in different cities to figure out which cities we really enjoyed. Because growing up, I grew up in Jersey and then I moved down to Tampa, and that was the only places I've ever been. So I wasn't really sure if I enjoyed the locations. And what ended up happening was I actually traveled. We went to Denver, Colorado. That was our first one. And we stayed there for a month. Then we went to Salt Lake City for 3 weeks, Nashville for 6 weeks. And we would just do these elongated stays at different places. And the reason for that was because we wanted to try out cities. We had different cities. We were like, oh, I think I want to live here. I think this might be a good location, but they just wouldn't pan out. And the best way to try anything, in my opinion, is not by visiting, it's by really doing the experience. And so I share that because I think for you guys, if you want to go live in another place, instead of like just rushing and purchasing a home, maybe it's a better idea to like go live there for a month or two, go explore, go try out 3 weeks there, whatever it is. But I just share that because a majority of the time we try to make these split second, these massive decisions very quickly. And in reality, these are the ones that we should really take our times with. And the other amazing thing about that trip was we traveled around for 8 months. And one of the best things about it, though, was that it was all in the United States. So we were able to see so many different sceneries in the States. And when a lot of Americans are like, oh, I've never been to Europe or I've never been to Asia or whatever it is, don't worry about that. Worry about that you have an incredible scenery right in our backyard, and you can literally hop in the car and just drive. You can go for 3 days if you're on the East Coast to the West Coast. And there's so much scenery and everything changes. And it's such an incredible experience. And that also helps a lot because for that trip, what I ended up doing was I literally packed up my car, drove my car from Tampa to Denver, and then I drove to Salt Lake City, then I drove to Nashville, then I drove back to Jersey, then we went to Charleston, South Carolina, then we went to Seabrook area in Charleston, and then we went to Florida, and we were just traveling. And the reason for that was I just wanted to see what other areas were like. I wanted to meet new people. I wanted to experience new things. And like I said, when you're in a new location, the whole perspective changes. So, like, one of the activities we did in Salt Lake City was we were there for 3 weeks, but I realized that Zion National Park was only a 3 hour drive. I go, that's fantastic. So, we booked an Airbnb and we went to Zion for a weekend. Now, the thing is, what people don't realize is as things are changing, and the only constant in the world is change. So, as things are always changing, you have to figure out how those become opportunities for you, to you, so that you can optimize your life. Because there's many times where we don't have the experiences, and it's not because we can't do it or we don't have the resources or whatever it is, but it's the constructs of our mind. It's what we believe to be possible. Like, so growing up, everyone was always like, you go on vacation for 1 week, sometimes you go for 2 weeks, you do whatever. And like these trips started expanding my mind to realize that it's like, whoa, Jordan, like you could actually do a lot more. There are a lot of ways to work around this. There are different creative ways to do these things. And what ended up happening was last year, we came up with the idea of actually traveling for 7 weeks, me and Madison in Europe. And the reason is because the year before that in 2022, we went to London and Iceland and we did a week-long trip. And it was fun. It was really incredible. But we went on 4 or 5 flights in 7 days and we spent so much time in the airport. And it was just by the end of the trip, we were so exhausted because we constantly were going on little hours of sleep because we were just spending so much time at the airport. And I started to realize that the airport can be optimal, but there's ways to make it better. And there's ways to make the experience better. And sometimes it's by elongating the trip. And so that's what we ended up doing. We decided that we were going to go to Europe for 7 weeks. I got incredible flight there using credit card points. So throughout this entire experience, I'm going to share what we did, how we did it, and then some of the tips and tricks I learned along the way so that maybe you can do this for yourself. Because I wanted to try out this new episode in regard to travel instead of so much mindset, because this is mindset. It's all mindset. So, like, us doing a 7 week trip is like running 100 miles. You know what I mean? They're both in your brain. Like, how are you going to do that? What does that even mean? What does that even look like? And that's kind of it all, where it's you put yourself in the uncomfortable situation to grow. So for us, it's always been how do we get into this uncomfortable situation and how are we going to figure it out? Because the more times that we push ourselves in an uncomfortable situation, you start to get comfortable in it. And that's what you really enjoy. And that's what ended up happening. So we go on the trip and we decided, so I ended up buying the flights. And the way I got the point flights were actually there was a really cool credit card point transfer deal where it was a redeemable flight. I think it was like 40,000 points for both of us. And you could also cancel it. And the way I did this was basically I realized that we were going to be in New Jersey. And so I bought the flight out of JFK to London Heathrow. That's usually a great entry into Europe. I know it's not part of the EU, but it's a great entry into Europe because from London, all the flights are super accessible and you can go to a ton of different places. And what ended up happening was we left on March 15th. So we took the overnight flight, got to London, and then we were in London for the day. And then we proceeded to go to the next morning. We actually stayed by the airport because the next morning we ended up having a really early flight and went to Rome, Italy. And we stayed in Rome, the place, for 12 days. And the reason for that was in my head, I thought we were going to do a similar type of trip to the US trip where we're going to be staying in each location for an elongated period of time. And maybe we were going to go 3 or 4 locations, stay for 2 weeks at a clip, and then travel from there. That is not what happened at all. That is what I thought was going to happen, but it just sometimes the cookie crumbles a little differently. So what ended up happening was prior to leaving for the trip, I literally only booked Rome, and then we booked a weekend in Sorrento, Italy. And then we booked a few activities in Rome, but that was really it. And the reason I wanted to go back to Rome for so long was because I knew the area really well. I knew I really enjoyed it, and I hadn't been there since I studied abroad. So some of these trips are a little nostalgic because I've been there, but I really wanted it to be a cool exploration for myself and Madison to see everything we wanted to see. So what ended up happening was we landed on Sunday, went to Rome for the week. And then on Friday, we went to Sorrento, Italy, and we went there for Friday, Saturday, came back Sunday. So you have to take the train to Naples, did a day trip to Pompeii, went to Sorrento. And Sorrento's this amazing little town, if you haven't heard of it. It's by the Amalfi Coast. But the other thing was we were going, and this is a tip, if anyone wants to do long travel, you want to go in the off seasons. The reason for that is the crowds die down drastically. We were going to some of the top restaurants with no reservations. Literally on Saturday night, we would just walk up and we would get into the restaurant because there just weren't that many people there. It was mostly locals, few tourists, which was a huge asset for us because we could barely plan on where we wanted to go, let alone how we were going to do it. The other major component was we were actually working while we were doing it. So we were working on our different things. So we actually worked on the time schedule of 2 to 10 p.m. or 1 to 9, depending on the time. But I'll go through the trip and then I'll go through the top lessons. So what we ended up doing was we went to Sorrento, came back to Rome, stayed there the rest of the week, and then it was trying to figure out what the next location was going to be. So for me, what I thought would be really valuable was for us to go see the other major cities in Italy and then maybe take a flight from Milan to a different location. So I started playing around with the airports and I found that Milan was actually right next to was actually right next to. So I noticed that Mulan was a major international airport hub, and we could actually get some good accessibility from there. So what I ended up doing was I found a flight to Porto, Portugal, which is northern Portugal, because a lot of my friends had been there and they said it was incredible. So we ended up doing Rome, then we took the train to Florence for 2 days, then we went to Venice for a day, then we went to Milan for a day, and then we flew over to Porto, Portugal. And what I started to realize here when we did that flight to Porto was that it didn't make sense to do as many flights. Flights are good, but if we can limit the flights, then we're not losing days. Because every time you go to the airport, it's 2 hours before. You're also carrying, we had two carry-on bags, a checked bag, two personal items. So we're just carrying a lot of stuff. And it was always, I found, a stressful moment for us when we had to move our stuff. It's how fast can we get our stuff into the next Airbnb, hotel, whatever it was. And that was always a process. And so we flew into Porto, and the major thing I realized was that the places we stayed at were more of apartments because they had a lot more space. So every place we stayed at was 500, 600, 700 square feet. And what would end up happening was we'd both be able to work much easier because since we're both doing kind of sales dynamics, it was difficult when we're both on the phone and everyone's kind of got to have their own space. So we went to Porto and then we were there for a few days, did some wine tours, absolutely incredible. And then we took the train to Lisbon, but we actually stayed in the city of Sintra. Sintra is this small castle town. It's absolutely incredible, but super touristy. So like when the tourists aren't there, and like the place we got was right in the middle of the town. So the first day we started working, they're actually doing the guitars. There was a guitarist, and we're listening to the music from our where we're staying. So it was really cool. It's a small town. So we ended up staying there for 3 days, and then we did Lisbon for 3 days. And then from Lisbon, we took a flight to Madrid and we went to Spain. And the cool thing about Lisbon, I mean, there's cool and a lot of hills. So it can be a challenging place. Like all of Portugal had many, many hills, which were good. But at the same time, it also, the views were incredible, but your legs are just burning. But it was fun. They had cabs like Uber to get everyone around and whatnot. And then we ended up going to Madrid, Spain, and we were there for 6 days. And what ended up happening in Madrid was we had this cool apartment right near it, and we ended up going to the Royal Hotel, like the Royal Mansion, like basically where their top families used to live. And just the views were incredible. They have an incredible park in Madrid. The food is just amazing. There was this place by Plaza Mayor that just had an incredible food. And then we ended up going to Barcelona. And in Barcelona, we were there for 3 days, and we actually ended up having we were on like the top floor, and the apartment we had was right next to the Sagrada Familia. Well, not right next, but like pretty close. And it had this whole probably like 300 square feet of just balcony that was turfed, and you could see the Sagrada Familia. So it was just an incredible view. And then from Barcelona, we ended up going to Nice, France because we've never been to the south of France. I've never been to France in general. So that was a cool new experience. And we went to Nice for 6 days to try to like slow down a little bit, relax, hang out. Because what I realized was those sprints we were doing were kind of tough and exhausting. So like when we did those 4 cities in 4 days, I was like, whoa, that was a lot of travel. Let's slow it down a little bit. So we did Nice for 6 days. And then we were supposed to actually go to Amsterdam. Nice was absolutely incredible. There's Monaco near there, there's Cannes, and we were supposed to go to Amsterdam after that, but we ended up changing it because it was King's Day. and you couldn't get to Paris because all the Eurostars, like their train system was all taken up. So we ended up changing the flight to Paris, and we went to Paris for 6 days, and then we got the train to London, and from London we stayed there for 2 days, and then we ended up taking the flight right back to Tampa, Florida. And it ended up being a total of 49 days. We stayed in like 14 locations, 6 different countries, and it was absolutely incredible. And the reason I'm sharing all this is because most people are like, how'd you do it? And that's what I'm going to explain to you. So what we ended up doing was we saved up some money, and what we really focused on was what we realized we were going to do was we were going to work while we were going to be there. So most of the days we would work US hours. And what that entailed was working 1 to 9 for the beginning of the trip, just depending on where the locations were, the time zones, etc. So we would work 1 to 9 a lot. And then towards the end of the trip, like the second half, we were working 2 to 10. And what you start to realize in Europe with that time zone is that you have the entire morning to yourself. So you would get up at like 8, you would go do whatever you wanted to do till like 1 or 2, meaning that you could do all of these different activities. You can go explore, you can go do all of these incredible things. And that's how we were able to get photo shoots in Paris. That's how we were able to see the Big Ben. That's how we were able to see the Roman Colosseum and do all these incredible things because we had the mornings. So most people aren't around in the morning time, especially on like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, meaning that you can go to most of your activity, anything you want to do at that time, especially in the off season. So like the busy tourist died down a lot, which gave us a lot of accessibility. So the other really cool thing is that we would have an entire day and then we would start working, which was so foreign to us because in America, most of the time, most people start at like 7:38, 9, and you're starting pretty much right away. So it's just people might work out beforehand, but they're not going on a whole exploration in a whole day. And what that gave for me, at least, it was one of my favorite things. Like, I truly enjoyed waking up and like being able to travel, explore for the morning, and then come back and really start the day. Because what we would end up doing is we would work, and then around that 6, 7 time frame, we would go get dinner, come back, and that's US time, it's lunchtime. We would come back, and then we would at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, we would end up going, maybe getting some ice cream or just going for a walk and just exploring. And the point being here is that like I'm sharing all this because I want to expand your mindset. I want to expand what you believe to be possible. Because the thing you start to realize is if I have done it, if someone else has done it, it's possible. And that's the other big thing that we started to learn is as we were meeting more and more people, what would end up happening is we would just be open to conversation and open to that because it was just us two. We didn't really meet up with a lot of friends while we were traveling. We met up with a few, but not too many. And you just start to meet all of these really cool and interesting people who are on a similar wavelength as you, as they're traveling for maybe 6 months, 4 months, 2 months, 2 weeks, whatever it may be. And it's like, how do you make the most of that? So for us, some of the biggest lessons we had was one of the major ones for me at least was always ask what are the chances that you can get whatever. And we use this one pretty often. It's a little uncomfortable, but like basically what it is like say you're gonna go do an activity like we did the Tower of London, which is like this castle, and we went up to them and we said, "What are the chances you can like give us a discount?" And to my surprise, we got a discount. We did it at the hotel. We did it everywhere. And when you do those types of questions, especially after you've built some good rapport with people, they're always so nice and accepting. And it's not a confrontational thing. It's just like, hey, man, what are the chances you could like take 10% off the Starbucks bill? Sometimes they'll do it. And when they would do it, it was always a win for us. It was always exciting. The other thing I really realized about Europe in general is that since most people are not tip oriented, they really just want to have fun at their job. Like they just want to enjoy their time as much as possible. And that's by having good conversations and being genuinely curious and learning about the adventure that most people are having. So when we would meet people, they were so open to us. Instead of in America, it's very like, I'm working on my thing, I have to do my thing. And it's just like, an open a perspective changer for myself where it's like, hey, maybe it's okay to be not so focused on myself and actually be learning about other people and seeing what they're doing. It was just a really good eye opener. And the other thing we realized is that it's always better to speak with people. Like, no matter what we're doing, you're always going to hit a higher level of happiness or growth or whatever when you're with other people, even people you may not know. So like some of our best nights were literally people we met at restaurants or bars as we're going out, just walking around because it was just me and Matt. Like we didn't know anybody. So we'd start conversations and we had friends and we had an incredible time in Florence and another one in Nice. We just would meet couples or would meet two friends and yeah, it in America, it's just not common. Like it's not common to go start talking with someone. And sometimes I'm looking forward to that opening more often, but there's just so many times where it's that spur of the moment, you're in the right place, you can make the friends. So whenever you're in a different situation or even in your normal situation, I highly recommend be open to who you might talk to or might receive or what might come to be because it's just a better experience when you're laughing with people, you're getting to meet new people, and it just becomes a much better overall time in general. The other major thing I learned is the power of being decisive. I found that indecisive can be difficult. So when you're decisive, it means that you've looked through the options and you've made a decision. Being indecisive is like making a decision and then changing that decision prior to that. And that's okay on little things. But when you're on a big picture of like, where are we going to travel to next? It's like we have to make the decision. And the thing is, the decision can always be redone. You don't have to sit in that decision. You can always redo it. So like people don't realize that, but you can always change a flight, you can always rebook a hotel, you can always get your money back, you can do whatever. And it's super important to realize that. The other major one is be present. Be present as much as possible. Whenever you're with new people, whenever you're in an experience, try to be super present because we all have our phones, we all have our different things, and they just take away and distract us from what's actually occurring. And some of our best moments happen from being present. And it's a skill that's being lost nowadays. So it's something I always try to practice, and it's something I highly recommend to you guys because being present is a gift. And let that be one. So really take make the most of that. And then the other major thing is that the people around us impact our beliefs on what is possible. So when they say the five people around you affect you, that you hang out the most, that is 1000% true. Because as we were traveling more and more and more, I started to realize that there are a lot of other people doing this, and it becomes commonplace. And now it's like, hey, we kind of did a short trip compared to the guy who's traveling around for the entire year, or the person who's going on a 6 month trip. And you just start to get around people that broaden your horizons and it opens your eyes drastically. And the cool thing about today is you don't even need them in your life. You can just kind of have these different ideas and have these different perspectives and meet these different people, and it could change everything for you. So really be open to like what is really possible. Like if there's someone really that much further ahead of you in something, like learn, be eager, don't judge. Don't live in judgment. That's not a healthy place. The other major thing in Europe is you got to be patient, especially with your food and your orders, because since they're not incentivized by tips, they won't always be the quickest. Meaning that when you go in for something, you have the expectation that they're going to meet with you in the first 3 minutes in America or 2 minutes. In Europe, that might be 10 minutes, 50. We've even had 15 minutes where we're just sitting there and no one's coming up to us. And the thing is, though, once you have the expectation of like, I don't expect anything, then it becomes much more receptive to like, if someone's doing it, oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. This is amazing. This is incredible. Because there's so many times where we're not open to that experience and we're not being receiving of what we believe is possible. And then the last thing I want to leave you guys with, this is super important, is that when you're stressed out, when you're angry and you're upset, you want to zoom out because sometimes that little microcosm, that little thing that's going on, like maybe it was a flight delay or a hotel got canceled or whatever, it's such a minor thing in your life because think about it. We have 365 days a year. And if you're 10 years old, that's 3,650 days. If you're 20 years old, that's like 7,300 days. And you start to realize this that a lot of us are at like 10,000, like me, myself, I'm at like almost 10,000 days. And if one day gets ruined, it's not a big deal, especially when you go on a longer trip. If you go on a shorter trip, each day becomes infinitely more valuable, meaning that you have to make the most of it. So by stretching out the trip and going to places for 3, 4, 5, 6 days, it gave us that spontaneity of just, hey, someone mentioned this is cool. Let's go check this out. Like there's this thing in Rome where the Pope comes and speaks every Wednesday. And I was like, that's incredible. Let's go do it. We were there Wednesday. Why not? And it's an open free service, and it's these are the core memories that people are creating, and it's not the memories of, oh, I super detailed plan my trip. It's sometimes you got to be spontaneous, you got to be open, you got to be receptive to what's out there in the world. And so I challenge you guys today not to go on a trip, not to do any of that, but what are you doing today that expands your mindset? The first thing I ever did that really expanded my mindset was going for the marathon, running the marathon, because that was something that was so like, that's impossible. 26.2 miles, how is that even done? Thousands of people do it all the time. And the thing is, we just have to figure out ways to push ourselves beyond the boundaries that society sets for us, our parents set for us, we set for ourselves. So go break through, clock in, and create the life that you want. Create the life that's going to inspire you to be better and make more and experience more and live more. Because when we do that, then it's things we want to share. It's things we're proud of, and it's things we're open to sharing. So go out there, create your incredible life. If not, I'm here to help. Reach out. And I really let me know what you guys thought about this because it's a completely different type of podcast. I wanted to share it with you. Like, subscribe, do all of that stuff. But really, I appreciate you guys for tuning in, listening each week. And if you want to hear more travel related stuff, let me know. I wish you all the best, and I can't wait to connect with you guys soon. Thank you.